In this lesson, we'll talk about understanding the view loading process. One of the key responsibilities a view controller has is to manage the lifecycle of a UI view. And a UI view is what all of our user interface components are built from. To work effectively with a UI view controller, it's important that you understand its key lifecycle methods. So there's load view, view did load, and view did unload. When we made the main view controller the root view controller of the window attempts to add the controller's view as its subview. So it will ask for the controller's view property, which will call the view method on the view controller. In the implementation of this method, first checks to see if the view is currently nil. If it's not nil, it means it's previously been loaded and can simply return it back to the caller, and no further action is needed. However, if it is nil, meaning that it has not yet been loaded, the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to call the view controller's load view method. And one of three things happens when the load view method is invoked. Either this method could be overridden, so that means it's been overridden by us, and we've provided our own custom implementation for how the view property will be set. More commonly, the view will get loaded from a nib file, and that's what we did in the case of the main view controller and the main view nib. And if neither one or two have happened, then the view controller will simply create an empty UI view and return that to the caller. Once the load view method is done executing, it will then invoke this method called view did load. View did load is a very common point of customization in a view controller. By the time this method is called, we can be assured that the view has been properly loaded and it's safe for us to perform any customizations we may need. Now on the flip side, it's also important to understand how views get unloaded. Handling low memory conditions is really standard operating procedure when you're developing iOS apps. Getting a low memory condition in no way means that your app is doing something wrong. iOS devices are very memory constrained, so dealing with low memory is very common, and it's just important that you make sure you're doing the right thing when those conditions occur. Specifically, what will happen is a low memory notification will get broadcast by the operating system, and the view controller then will respond and invoke its did receive memory warning method. Now, if possible, it will attempt to release the controller's view. How it determines whether or not it can release the view depends on where that view controller is on screen. So if it's the active view controller, the view controller the user is currently seeing, it's not possible to unload that view because doing so would make your UI disappear. But there are lots of cases where a view controller may be in memory, but not necessarily on screen. And in those cases, it is safe to unload that view. If it was able to successfully unload the view controller's view, it will then invoke this method called view did unload. And we can override this method to release anything that can be recreated in that load view did load cycle. Let's take a look at this graphically to get a little better understanding of what's happening. A low memory notification gets broadcast by the operating system. The view controller receives that notification and then invokes its did receive memory warning method. If it was able to successfully unload the view, it will then trigger the view did unload method, which provides us an opportunity to clean up anything that could be recreated in the load view did load cycle. You should now have a much better understanding of the view loading process. I think this is a very important part of getting your head wrapped around view controllers and the way they work, so that you always know the appropriate place to customize a view controller and make sure you're properly cleaning up after yourself when you need to.